So we're here today with YWIB-Seattle and Dr. Kat Pittack. I'm Mackenzie Costin, the Vice Chair for YWIB-Seattle. We also have
Lauren, the chair of YWIB-Seattle.
And we are having an interview discussion with Dr. Pittack about her path and her life and her science. And we will let her introduce herself to start things off.
All right. Hi, I'm Dr. Kat Pittack, and I am an assistant teaching professor at the University of Washington School of Medicine. I am also the director of the Willed Body program here at the University of Washington. That's a whole body donation program that services, donors to medical schools and other healthcare professionals that need them. Yeah, that's pretty good intro. Yeah. Or did you want?
Perfect.
All right, there we go.
So I guess just to start off, did you always know that this is what you wanted to do?
So I teach anatomy. Embryology, and I have taught biology. No, I did not know that this was always what I wanted to do. I started out with a very clear mission of becoming a scientist. And I knew I wanted to be some sort of biological scientist. My dad's a physicist. I had absolutely no brain or desire to go into those kind of sciences. But I knew I wanted to do some sort of biological science. And so when I went to school, I first started studying geology, and that just wasn't too lifelike for me. And then I switched over to biochemistry. I was going to become a chemistry major, but you had to take 2 years of physics, and that wasn't going to work for me, and like 2 years of math. And so I was like, ooh, biochemistry, that sounds kind of fun. And so I just kind of meandered around. I ended up in biochemistry, and I ended up really liking it. And I did a project. We can talk about that at some point, and then applied for graduate programs after, doing a little bit of research here and there to kind of figure out more what I liked. So I did not know that I would end up teaching anatomy at a medical school, teaching anatomy at a medical school. It's not what I had foreseen for myself. I imagined myself as a researcher, doing marvelous, earth-shattering research, in a lab, writing grants, and it just didn't work out that way.
So you had a pretty twisty, turvy path, it sounds like, and I'm excited to hear more about it. But where did you go to undergrad?
I went to the University of Massachusetts. I grew up in the Boston area. First, we were in Germany, then California, then the Boston area as a family. And so I went to the University of Massachusetts, where I, did the geology to biochemistry switching. It took me 5 years to get through my undergrad because I switched my major. If you're, willing to take a little extra time, I think it's important to try different things and to just call uncle, when you're in a major that doesn't, that suddenly you find is not working for you. I think I've always told my kids, college is the time to explore, and I want you to explore. And so, I highly encourage, people to do that. And so then I graduated with a biochemistry degree. So that's why I did my undergrad. Yeah.
And did you do research while you were in undergrad?
I did a project. I can't even remember the department where it was now. It was, one of those things where I walked around in the building. This is like, all right, I'm old, okay? This is before email and the internet and all that. So you walked around, a building, and you looked at people's posters and you read little brochures. And I became interested in a project about endothelial cells. Endothelial cells line the inside of your blood vessels. And so I took on this little project, and the graduate student that I was working with, her name was Donna Beers. She was awesome. I would call her like one of my, like science mentors. She just was so excited about science and the project that I was like, this is great. I really like it. It involved cell culture and then doing some experiments on the cell cultures. And it really got me excited to do that. And I did that project for about like 2 years while I was an undergrad.
Wow. So that was definitely important to your experience moving forward. Um, or like, I guess, what was the biggest takeaway from your research experience in undergrad? And were there any, uh, is there any advice you would give to those who are trying to balance gaining research experience while also maintaining their classes as well?
Yeah, that balance was hard. I would say one of the things that I learned from that project was just how fun it was to be in a lab and to be part of a project. And in particular, like a more of a biological, project. And to be thinking about, to take like one little piece of a project and then to read some papers, about, I mean, I was starting from scratch, like what are endothelial cells and, what is this project all about, right? And just the excitement that I got from reading papers about that subject made me really realize that, oh, this is really fun. I really enjoy this. And then I just enjoyed the being in the lab and the pipetting and the culturing my cells and, just really feeling like, my cells were, like my little babies, right, with their fluid on them, and I actually had to get them out of cow aortas, and so I kind of cultured them from the very start, and then I would split them anyway. It was just kind of made me feel really passionate, about the lab work and just the learning part, of the lab work. It was hard to balance because I was taking some, heavy load classes. That's one of the reasons I expanded out to 5 years, was so that I could keep my load, manageable. I was also playing sports. Sports and athletics has always been really important to me, and so I wasn't willing to completely lock myself in the library and the lab, just to graduate on time. I needed to play sports, and so that's why it took me 5 years. But yeah, and just keeping that balance, I think at some point you just have to tell yourself, what's important and kind of really niche out your day and be organized, like I'm gonna, when I'm at school, I'm at school. When I'm in the lab, I'm in lab. Then I'm gonna go, do my workout, my sports, and then, I'll go home and, do some more work. So just being really organized and, like kind of doing time management was really important.
Yeah. What sports did you play?
I played field hockey and lacrosse in high school, and I also ran track. And then when I got to college, none of those things really worked for me. They seemed too time consuming. So I picked up ultimate frisbee,
Oh,
and I played ultimate frisbee for 22 years on a college team, post college, and it was my passion. And I was on a women's team like all night for those 22 years, and I loved the women that I played sports with. They're still my best friends, for life basically. And we played the women's team here in Seattle. I played on the women's team here. I was the captain for many years, and we went to nationals and worlds, and we were very competitive. Yeah, so yeah, that was my like sport. And frisbee caused me to make some decisions about my life and where I was going. Clearly it took me 5 years to get through school, but I got to play 5 years of college ultimate.
Yeah. And even beyond.
anything else in undergrad besides the research and the sports? Like, did you volunteer or did you work?
I did not. I had like a little variety of jobs here and there, some of them that were, had a research bend to them, but were like, just, like working in a lab basically, not for, um, uh, just doing a project, but like being a lab worker. I did some of that kind of stuff just to, earn a little bit of money. I worked at a food co-op. No, that was pretty much it, just like
Yeah.
some sort of little job, sports, the lab work, and in my my classes.
So
That's enough,
full
right?
schedule.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
One thing I have been hearing you say a lot is that you have been around people who you just love, specifically your sports friends and teammates, and then also your mentor. So is that, I guess, do you have anything to say in regards to how important surrounding yourself with those who really uplift you? Anything to say about that?
Yeah, I think that's key. My undergraduate mentor, who Donna Beer was in his lab. He was great. I really enjoyed working for him. He was passionate. He was very supportive of, undergraduates and somebody coming in and, an undergraduate coming in and doing a little project. Donna was just, she was just so passionate about science that, kind of made me feel that passion as well. And she was always willing to take the time to sit down and, have a conversation with you. Between college and grad school, I took 2 years off. And one summer I did a project at Boston University, and I really enjoyed the mentor there. He was good again, very supportive. I didn't like the project as much. It involved, it was a burn study, and which is very important, to figure out how to treat burns. But they did it on rats, and so they had to burn, the rats. Not, and they did it with, steaming water and stuff, and that was really hard for me. And so I realized when I was involved in that project that I couldn't do that kind of work, that I couldn't work with animals in that way. I was, of course, a very staunch vegetarian at the time and so forth. So that was just like, that this is not going to work for me. So it's, it's important to have projects like that too, where you walk away and you go, I cannot do a project where I'm, in this case, harming rats. But the mentor himself, he was very, very supportive. I got to be involved in, writing a paper. Then my PhD mentor here at the University of Washington, where I got my PhD, was I still see him now because I'm in the same department now, and he's one of my favorite people, in the world. Just an enthusiastic scientist, just down to the core, and very passionate about his science. And you walk in the morning and he'd be like, did you read that paper? I remember coming from a hiking trip and I was out in the woods for more than 2 weeks. And the minute I walked back in, he was like, so while you were out, this paper, about your project was written. I was just like, I can't even think past where I'm going to set up my tent right now, and what kind of food I'm going to eat tonight, on my burner. And, but he was just so passionate, about science, and that, you definitely got, lifted towards science is great. I really love it. So yes, finding the right mentor is a really important part of your, experience, your travels. Finding a mentor or a project, like I said, that you're like, oh, that's not going to work so well for me, is also important too, so you can make choices, so you can see what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, that's crucial. Definitely crucial, because we wouldn't know what we want if we didn't know what we don't want. So.
Yep, exactly. I think knowing what you don't want is almost as important as figuring out what you want. And I definitely went through some of those stages as well. And, and I see other students, I taught undergrads here for a long time at UW, and, I see them going through those stages too, that, oh, this isn't what I want.
How did you navigate through one of those stages?
Yeah, so
you want to share one of those stages?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to share it. So I was about 4 years into my PhD, and I was working with little chick embryos, on an egg. So that was all okay animal-wise for me, and getting lots of support from my mentor. And all of a sudden, I was like, I'm not sure this is what I want. I'm not sure I want to write grants. I'm not sure that I started noticing that, people, as they progressed in science, spent more time in their offices than in the lab. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that, because this is, I like this labby stuff. And I became a little disillusioned, with the idea of, being a researcher. And so, and, leading that pure science life. And so I thought about it for a long time. And then I went to my PhD mentor and I was like, I think I'm done. I don't think I want to do this. And he was fabulous. I still, to this day, thank him every once in a while. And he was like, look, you're 4 years in, if you leave now, you're not, there's no master's program here where I was. And he was like, you're going to have nothing. And what can I do to help you finish these 2 years? Mm-hmm. And so we talked about it for a long time. And I was like, and he had one of the techs in the lab help me with some of my experiments that weren't working. And he helped me through those last couple of years so that I had that PhD behind my name and, had written a dissertation and so forth. And like I said, I thank him to this day for that. And then I set up a postdoc here in the department. My other problem is I fell in love with Seattle, and I did not want to leave here. Yeah, and I think that happens to a lot of people. And usually after you finish your PhD, you're supposed to kind of go somewhere else. And I looked around and I couldn't, really find anything in the Seattle area that I was super psyched about at that time. And so I did a postdoc just right here in my very department, which is like, a big taboo. You shouldn't be like just walking down the hall and doing something similar. And but I knew I was just, trying to figure it out. And then I did a little internship in a PT clinic because all of my sports had always kept me very interested in the human body. I actually had taken an anatomy class here with the medical students, and I really liked it. And so I did some PT kind of, just sort of checking out, do I want to become a PT? And I just decided that was a lot more schooling in addition to what I'd already done. And so then I don't know where I got this idea, but I decided to go to massage school. And my father has a PhD, and he was like, you're doing what? You're gonna take your PhD and go to massage school? And I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. So I went through massage school, and I loved a lot of it. And then I started teaching massage at that school, which included anatomy. And I was just like, that's when I just started lighting up. I was like, oh my gosh, the human body is so incredibly cool. And I've always had a love of anatomy, since I was a little, I don't always talk about this, and this is no lie, but when I was young, I had this giant encyclopedia. It was like this big and it had these really cool pictures. And I would open it up and kind of putz through it, like when I was, like in the winter when there's nothing else to do. And I would always go to the anatomy section. And that thought came to me years later when I was like, when did I start to become, thoughtful about anatomy and what I want to do? And that was some of the early stages, right? So then I was a massage therapist for a little while, and I taught massage. And then I realized while I was teaching that I just really loved the teaching aspect of it. So I called the department here at where I got my PhD, because they also taught anatomy. And I was like, I want to teach anatomy. Do you guys need somebody? And they're like, well, as a matter of fact, we do. And so I kind of slid in, through the back door, like they hired me to be an anatomy instructor. And I ended up, having to teach a lot of, the detail to myself. But that's kind of how I started what I'm doing, teaching the anatomy and embryology to nurses, med students, undergrads. And now I'm, doing strictly med students at the time right now.
And is that the Department of Biological Structure?
Yeah, that's the Department of Biological Structure, because it encompasses everything from crystallography to a lot of neuro stuff. So neuro research. And then it also includes, we also teach anatomy, gross anatomy and histology to students. And so biological structure kind of encompasses everything. And so, yeah, that's the department where I got my PhD and where I teach now.
That's awesome. And that also kind of highlights the importance too of asking for what you want, or even if you don't know if there's a position that's available to you, seeing if it's there.
Yeah, exactly. And I, not to, be like a cornball or anything, but I always tell that to my kids too, is that it's really easy to send somebody, these days an email, hey, do you have a spot? And it's so easy for them to say, no, I don't, right? While it's so much more effective if you knock on somebody's door and say, hey, can I come by? And, I noticed that you do research about inflammation and endothelial cells. Can I come by and talk to you about that? And then once you're face to face, like I found, students who would come to me and talk to me face to face, it was almost impossible to refuse them anything. Can I get into your class, please? Somebody sent me an email. It was so much easier to say, no, my class is full. While if they come to your door and they're like, oh, I really need and want to take this class, I'm literally like writing them a note, saying, okay, you can come into my class, right? So go ask, for what you want. Even in this, I know we're in the middle of COVID, so it's not as possible, but even in this, this virtual world, it's important to make personal contacts with people face to face, if you can do a Zoom or whatever and just meet people. So they see the light in your eyes and and just make a connection with you. Just very important to do, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I when I moved back to Seattle, I definitely took advantage of that. And the individuals who are willing to introduce me to other people was very, very beneficial. And definitely meeting in person, even just to get some advice, and just hearing their story, because I think that's of great benefit. Even if they don't have a position available or they do end up saying no, you never know what you're going to get in return from what they decide to share with you, and that could be very beneficial. So
Yep. All very true. You are very wise.
So I'm curious, since you said you took 2 years off after undergrad before grad school, did you know you wanted to go to grad school even with those gap years, or was it a time to decide if you wanted to go to grad school?
At that point, I was still driven. I was like, I knew I wanted to go to grad school. I knew I wanted to get my PhD and do research. And so I worked in a biotech firm in the Boston area for 2 years, Biogen, which is now coming up with they weren't even looking at Alzheimer's, disease at all when I was there. I did more, the inflammatory response. And yeah, and just working there, I got even more charged. I was like, this is great, So it was a different side. It was the non-academic side, of, I'm not saying it's being at a biotech firm isn't academic. That's not what I meant to imply. But it wasn't here when you're at a university, you have to bring in grants, and you have to write papers. When you're at a biotech firm, there's a little bit of leeway with what's going on there, and so forth. So I got to see a different side of research and just do like pure research. My boss wasn't as keen on writing papers as he was on getting a product out the door that would help with the inflammatory response, right? And so it's different. And I know that was a long time ago, right? I don't know how biotech has changed these days, right? But that was more that was a time when I could just really do research and just apply to grad schools and take all my GREs and all that kind of stuff and still enjoy life, playing frisbee, and and just traveling and kind of taking some time off from school, which I think is very important, actually.
Yeah, figuring out how to live outside of being in school, very important. Yeah. And did you know you wanted to still do a sort of obviously a biologically oriented PhD, but how did you end up at biological structure specifically, as opposed to molecular?
Yeah, one of the things that attracted me to this department in particular was they had a variety of choices, right? And so I wasn't applying to just a strict neuro program or just a strict, program that was doing this, but they had people doing crystallography, which I wasn't so much interested in, all the way, all these histological projects and then molecular projects and also some embryological projects, right? And so there were people here doing inflammatory studies, right? Which, again, I seemed to have an interest in at the time. And so it gave me this department gave me a lot of variety of choices, because I wasn't yet ready to say, this is what I want to do. And it's interesting because sometimes you talk to young students and, nowadays for me, it tends to be either pre-meds or medical students. And, it's fun, when you talk to a pre-med student that was, in my undergraduate class, and they're like, I want to be a cardiothoracic surgeon, right? And then, you're like, oh, that's great, and then, you always change, what you're thinking about, and, as you're traveling through life. And I think that's important too, is just kind of, making sure that you have a variety of choices still in front of you before you, work your way down a pathway. And, you never close doors, right? Per se, but you're always like, oh, I know I want to get my PhD, but I don't want to make a choice yet about what my thesis project is going to be yet, right? And so, for example, when I got here, I did a project on tooth development. So we were looking at, you know, how teeth erupt and how they form. And then I did I forgot my other project was, you know, again, an inflammatory response thing. And then I did a muscle cell project. And then I ended up in this embryological lab where with my mentor, we were looking at eye development, right? And so, I mean, if you think about like my interest in inflammation and endothelial cells, and I ended up doing my PhD in eye development, right? The molecular signals involved in eye development, it's really quite different, right? So I just tried different things until I found something that I was very excited about, and a fit with my mentor, you know, basically. So
That's good to hear too, that within the PhD program, it isn't as narrow as some people might think, because I think that's often kind of discouraging. But even when you decide that, you have room to try different projects and different things and find what you want to do.
exactly, it's important to try different things, and you know, most programs allow you to, you know, branch out and try different things. But and you know, that's not to take anything away from people who are like, I know what I'm going to be, and I'm going to do this project, and that's going to get me from point A to point B, and that's great, and there's lots of people like that. And you know, you don't have to feel like, oh, I should try something different. Well, you know, if you know what you want, you know what you want, right? But for a lot of us, it's, you know, it's trying different things. And a lot of most PhD programs allow you to, you know, check out different programs and even do a PhD that is with somebody that's not in that department, right? That is also, you know, a possibility for most PhD programs.
So it's definitely important to be open to exploring your interests and even things you might not be interested in. It sounds like that's definitely that was very beneficial to your path and where you are now. So just to break it down, can you once again just say what you undergrad and then your little break, you took a 2-year break, and then PhD, and then massage school, and then where you are now. Where you are now, is there anything in that timeline of your path that did I say that right, or do you want to just maybe explain that a little more, or
Yeah,
just
no,
break
that
it down just so we can all make sure we're following along?
I know, because I'm an oddball, maybe not so odd, but yeah, you pretty much summarized it there. I went to, well, and I even changed universities too. I went to a small university in Maine for a year. Then I switched to a bigger university, which I liked a lot better. That was UMass. And so got my undergraduate. Then I took 2 years off and worked at a biotech firm, applied to graduate schools, moved out to Seattle because I needed bigger mountains than the East Coast could offer me. I love the East Coast mountains, but I wanted to check these mountains out here. And the program here was great. And then finished my PhD and started a postdoc, but then went to massage school. Then I started teaching at the massage school. And then I started teaching anatomy here at the medical school. Yeah.
So cool.
And I love what I do. I love what I do. It's yeah. But if you'd told me years ago that this is what I was going to be doing, I would have been like, no, I don't think so. I don't think so. And partially that's because I was a very, very nervous public speaker. And I actually, at one point in college, I gave a little research talk and I hyperventilated and had to breathe into a paper bag. And it was really embarrassing. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm terrible at this. And I never want to do that again. And when I started my PhD here, you know, again, my mentor noticed that about me, that even little lab, you know, within our lab group, I would get up and I would talk. I'd be very, very nervous and, you know, like have, you know, just like this fear of public speaking. And he made me talk everywhere. He was just like, you're talking here, you're giving a talk here. He made me talk at to give a talk instead of a poster, you know, at the neuroscience meeting, which was like, you know, boatloads of people and they're neuroscientists and they're very intimidating. And, you know, and I practically like, you know, had a coronary while, you know, I was doing this, but I made it through, and he just kept making me do it time after time. And finally I got more comfortable. And And so then when I started teaching, it was all very small at first. And then I started teaching this undergraduate class that started out as 200 students. And I thought I was going to have like a mental breakdown the first time I walked in and talked in front of 200 students. And actually, one of my evaluations from that year, one of the students said, I thought it was very classic. This is one of those comments that evaluation notes that you like because they help you change, right? And it was, you do such a nice job teaching, and I appreciated everything you said, but I kept hoping you were going to become less nervous as the quarter wore on, and you never did. And I hope that you do, and you know, in your future. And so I was like, oh God, all right. So you know, I need to be less nervous. And then one of my other students wrote me an evaluation one year that said, this is like shortly after that, that said, you should try to just be yourself. You know, you should try not to be anything else but yourself when you're lecturing or, you know, teaching. And I thought about that for a long time, and I was like, who am I trying to be? You know, I'm trying to be like some of the professors that I used to have. And then I was like, no, all right, I'll try to be myself. And I let kind of the goofy side of myself come out, and I started telling jokes and putting, you know, pictures of minions in Edna mode or whatever, you know, in my slides. And from that moment on, I became more comfortable, you know, kind of in my skin and, you know, in my lectures. And but if you told me when I was an undergrad that I was going to talk in front of, that I was going to teach a class of 450, you know, to 500 students, I would have been like, no, you're completely wrong. I'm not going to be doing that. So there you go.
I love that advice of trying to be yourself when you're, you know, nervous, because a lot of people have a tough time public speaking, and with science, it's kind of an unspoken rule that you do a lot of public speaking and presenting. And as an undergrad, a lot of times you're just thrown into it and terrified. And that's something I'd not heard as a strategy to work on that. So that's awesome.
Yeah, you'll always, if you be yourself and you have a little bit of a goofy side to yourself, or even, you know, a sense of humor, there's always going to be somebody that doesn't appreciate it, right? But what, you know, whatever, you just, if you are true to yourself and who you are, you know, when you're speaking to others, you'll just be a lot more comfortable, and you'll be able to get through those, you know, those moments of uncomfortableness. I remember when I was doing one of my talks for my PhD, you have to like these like little milestones. There was somebody in the audience, it was a professor here, who was kind of asking me a lot of questions. And I was starting to get kind of uncomfortable. And he asked me a question that I wanted to think about. I didn't want to like start opening my mouth and start talking. And but everybody was staring at me, and I was a little uncomfortable. So I started humming the Jeopardy song, you know, just to kind of like do, 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 do. And I could see my PhD mentor, he was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're doing this. But it kind of broke the, you know, that uncomfortable silence, you know, for them and me. And then I had that moment where, you know, I was able to then answer the question, you know, in a, you know, from a different place than that, like, you know, I'm so nervous that the neurons, you know, in my frontal cortex are, you know, they're not functioning right now, right? Because all I can think about is how nervous I am. And I think it's, you know, important to be able to move past that. But, you know, yes, public speaking is difficult, and it just takes practice and to just, you know, be yourself.
Yeah, and it's not, I mean, it's not that serious. I think a lot of it is, there's this view of public speaking that it's something very serious, that you have to do it by the book, very strict, especially within the certain fields. And so I think what you said about just being yourself and just being easy about it, and just that's crucial. I think that's crucial in every area of our life.
Yeah. The other thing that I really learned when I was public speaking and teaching was it's okay if you don't know the answers to everything. You know, it used to be before the internet, you know, like now students sit in class and, you know, if you say something, they can Google it. They can be like, excuse me, you know, I just looked that up and that's not true. Right. But even before that, you know, students can look things up, and people remember what you say. Right. And if somebody asks a question, then you really don't know the answer, you know, say that. It's okay. You don't have to be all knowing. Right. And when I realized that too, I became a lot more comfortable teaching. and just saying, hey, I don't know that right now, and I'm going to look it up. Send me an email. I'm going to look it up, and I'll bring that answer to class tomorrow. It's so much better than telling an untruth or something that is a sort of truth. Because if you tell a sort of truth or an untruth, because you're kind of hedging your bets, you got to come back and say, that, no, excuse me, yesterday in class. And I did that a couple of times. And then I was like, okay, new strategy required here, right? Where, it was just like, oh my gosh, I can't pretend, I can't not, I don't want the students to know that I don't know this. So I'm just gonna hedge my bets here. And, and then I had to come back the next day and say, so yesterday. So instead, you just call it what it is. I don't know the answer to that. And I'll look it up for you and I'll bring it to class tomorrow. And I would always be very conscientious of that and make sure that, I followed through on that. And I would say, hey, I looked that up last night. Here's what I found. And students appreciate that, a lot more than, or not only just students, but anybody that you're talking to appreciates that a lot more than, if you're gonna try to hedge your bets. I will sometimes in smaller audiences say, now I'm pontificating here based on what I know. I'm gonna make this stretch here with my knowledge, and that's okay too. But you can say that at first, and you can say, so I know this, and I don't exactly know the answer, but I'm gonna just think through it here out loud, and then we'll look it up, right? I think all of those are, pretty good approaches, right? So
Yeah, because we're all students and teachers, and I feel like that role is simultaneous. So that's beautiful. It's wonderful. Definitely. So how did you balance? I guess I know that you do a lot now in your current career. What's your day-to-day life like, and how do you balance that with your personal life? Are they intertwined because you love your job so much, or I guess
I know what I need, and I take care of myself in that way. Sometimes I'm not as good at it as other times. I know I need some sort of physical exercise every day. And so, I built in my bike commute, or, I'll figure out like every day I'll plan, like when am I going to swim? What day am I going to hike? That kind of stuff. And what day, I'm going to ride my bike. So that's a big part of my general equation. And then I I have learned the last few years that you can't get everything done in a day that you kind of have planned sometimes. And it's okay to go home and say, my day is done and I need to sit on the couch with this book, or, and just read something. I don't want to pull out my computer. No, I didn't finish that project. I'm going to do it tomorrow. And that took me a really long time. Like, I think that only within the last like 5 years have I learned really to set boundaries like that. I always in my life would fit in some sort of physical exercise, but then I would take out of my relaxing time, at home, that downtime. And when I was a young mom, that was even harder. I definitely burned the candle at both ends, and sometimes didn't do everything well. And because I was, trying to be a good mom and trying to like teach at the same time, and and so forth. And but I think that, again, time, just learning time management and the things that are important to you, that are like, I'm not, this is a no deal, I'm not gonna not work out. Luckily I have my husband partner. He knows that, if I don't work out, just an evil bad person. And I'm really grumpy. And so, when I, if I haven't, when we were both like working and we had young kids, and I would come home and I hadn't worked out, he'd just be like, go, you need to go for a run, and and now I'll take care of the kids. And having that support, a supportive network that realizes what your needs are. So I think first you have to understand what your need is, like, what can I not live without? Is it that I need to sit with my book at night? Do I need to bake cookies, every whatever night? Do I need to go for a run or a swim? What is it that I need? And how can the people around me, support me, in that way? And I think that's a really important part of our lifelong learning about ourselves, is
Yeah.
discovering, what you need and how to get what you need. And then how to get all your stuff done in a certain amount of time, but also know that you're not going to get everything done. You may sit down for an hour or two at night and work, and then you got to put it away. You got to go to bed, right?
Yeah, self-love and self-care are that's the that's where it starts, and I think that's where it ends too. And that's the middle. That's all
Always.
always. And having that in place is um, makes everything better.
Yeah.
And it can help you figure out too what sorts of careers you're looking for, or what sort of job you want to do.
Yeah, just knowing who you are and being okay to make mistakes and make choices of what you and even if it's a little interest, just giving it a try. You never know. Like you said with massage, um, how that was eye-opening for you, more so eye-opening that you saw your love for anatomy was much greater than you realized. I guess I don't know if I said that right, but that's what I took from it. um, so that's, yeah, knowing yourself is a key thing for sure. um any other questions, Mackenzie? Anything else you want to share? Or
Well, I'd love to hear more about the Willed Body program too. So we
Yeah.
haven't really talked much about that. So
Yeah.
when did that come into the picture?
Yeah, that was one of those things that I added into my life last March. And sometimes I'm like, oh, did I add too much? Because I've had to actually make some choices, and I hadn't had to do that in a while. I'm pretty comfortable with my teaching part of my career right now. I'm even, involved in a little, research project. I finally branched. I had these many years where my kids were young, and my kids and my teaching were my focus, and I didn't want to add, anything else on. So my people would always say, are you going to do a research project? A little paper. No, I have kids that are important, and, I have, my teaching. But so my kids are 22 and 20 now, and so have a little bit more time in my life. But the Willed Body program I added to my plate in March. The Willed Body program is affiliated with the University of Washington School of Medicine, and it is a whole body donation program where are the donors that we get here then are used in anatomy teaching labs, my anatomy teaching lab, to so that students can dissect and learn human anatomy. And we also the sometimes the donors go to a smaller school that teaches PTOT, so we provide a lot of schools with teaching schools with donors for teaching human anatomy. And I was involved in the program for ever since I started teaching anatomy here. I knew about the program, and we would get the donors from the program here. But then in March I stepped into being the director of the Willed Body program, and in the midst of COVID, which was very challenging, and in the midst of, I had a good amount of turnover of employees for a variety of reasons, and so it's been more than just a little side job, right? It's been I have a real passion for the program. I think it's one of the most extraordinary gifts that somebody can give of themselves. I totally get it's not for everybody. I don't run around, with my banner, like donate your body. I totally get it. But for those people that do, it's an incredible gift that you give future healthcare providers. The training to see what the human body looks like on the inside. The variation between human bodies is incredible, and healthcare professionals need to know that. So I feel so passionate about the program that when it was offered to me, I was like, oh, of course I want to do this, and I'm going to make it a better program. And then I realized the reality of the time it takes to to make it what I envision, and that's where I have learned that I can't get it all done tonight. It can wait until tomorrow. And it may have to wait until next week, because I'm teaching right now, and that's number one. And my students aren't gonna wait. And the new website for the Willed Body program can wait a week, and so I have had to learn to prioritize, and that's been a little new for me. But it's just a marvelous, wonderful program. And the people who, like I said, who donate their bodies to us are, it's just, I just feel like I just want to take care of, the donors. And so my biggest thing is that they're treated with respect from the moment they come into our door till the moment that their cremains are sent back. In the classroom, I don't call them cadavers, I call them donors. And my students, they start to pick up on that, and they start to call them donors, and because that's what they are. And we write thank you letters, to the donors, and at the end of the year, and the students just write these just wonderful, thankful, notes that we don't send them to the families because the donors are anonymous, to the students. But we make a big poster and put it on the wall, and the students will, just write about how much they appreciated, learning from these people. So that, in a nutshell, is the Will Body Program.
That's
And I'm happy to answer any other questions you have, because I know it's very fascinating.
Wow.
It's
No, that's
cool. Yeah.
That's incredible. And your passion for it and love for it and appreciation for it was radiating through my computer screen. And I felt that so strongly. So yeah, wow. Yeah, really beautiful program.
And I love how you talk about it and the thank you notes, because I imagine it can be, kind of a sad thing sometimes to see, donors all the time. So have you had to kind of learn to deal with kind of some grief or any sort of sadness that comes along with that?
For those who want to go into anatomy specifically, or any, yeah.
Yeah,
Or
because in a lot of
now,
fields you
now.
can have an anatomy lab or have some project that you might be dealing with.
Yeah, it's I remember when I first saw, the donors, it was hard. But then what I would tell myself, and I still firmly believe this, is the human donors that we have in the lab went through a lot of trouble and thought to donate their bodies to this cause. And when I was in college, I don't know about you guys, but I dissected a cat. And I found that, first of all, I was a vegetarian, I was an animal lover and all this stuff. And I found that very upsetting. And to me, cats and rats and all these animals that, they didn't ask, they didn't fill out paperwork, they didn't thoughtfully decide. Now, I understand that, without alternative research methods, there is a need for research animals. I understand that. I just didn't want to be the one to do it.
Yeah.
And I didn't like doing the dissection on a cat. And my donors want to be there, and they have decided that. And so that's what lets me be okay, with standing there with a deceased human, and to work on them. I'm going to admit that working on faces is always very challenging to me. So that I have parts of the body that are challenging. We help the students through it by doing a little, kind of talking about their fears, around being, with somebody who, the body donors. And we have counselors available for them for their first time. And I tell them about the program and where the donors came from. And then, we have a moment of silence when we first come to the lab. And the first time they come in, they just meet their donors. They don't actually go in and start to dissect. And so we kind of unravel that process as slowly as we can, given the time that we have. And I think that most of the students end up, okay, there might always be, a student who just had a relative pass away, or just somebody in their life recently passed away. And that's a hard moment. I remember the year that my grandmother passed away. And, I came back to the lab, that after, being at her funeral and so forth. And I had a really hard time, because every female donor that I looked at in there, I was like, oh, every 86-year-old female donor felt like it could be my grandmother. It wasn't. I'm just saying. And that was a really hard time. And so we give space to the students to just honor, that feeling. And eventually, some don't want to dissect, and that's okay. They have partners to dissect. Some of them, stay, kind of hands off, but eventually, everybody sort of, finds a part of the body that they can manage to work through. And so, I don't know, those are some of the ways that kind of deal, with that situation. And I just fully respect what these folks have done for others. Just a completely selfless gift of their bodies. We hold on to the bodies, the donors, for like up to 2-3 years, and then the cremains are given back to the families. Um, and I thank the families for allowing us to hang on to their loved ones for that long. And I don't know, I did that sort of help a little
Oh,
bit?
yeah.
I just think
Yeah,
it's
that's perfect. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's just a beautiful gift.
Yeah.
And our healthcare providers, they're getting a lot of airtime these days, as they totally should. And it's one of the ways that they learn is, that they learn anatomy is from, a donor. And so it's important. It's an important project.
Oh, yeah. Life-changing program for a lot of people.
Mhm. Yeah, in a lot of ways too, because it's not just people who go into anatomy, right? It's multiple fields or people who are in the medical, pursuing a medical career, or yeah, it's crucial. And so the possibility and the um, opportunity of what could come about from the donors is incredible, and I think it's infinite. So um, that's, yeah, really really awesome program.
How has teaching anatomy changed with COVID? Because it sounds like a very hands-on thing.
Yeah, so last March, with the medical students, we had to switch over to virtual teaching, like almost instantly. And that was, I gotta say, I was pretty depressed after like a month of that, because part of what I love about my job is being with students and, interacting with them in the lab and getting to know them. I love getting to know my students. And so that was really hard. And after a month, I was like, why am I so down and out? And I realized it was because I was not teaching in the lab. So then when the fall came around, they allowed us to come back to the lab. We would distance, and we taught each lab twice, because, so that we could have limited, decreased number of students in the lab. And, but we're back in the lab now. We come in one door, exit out the other door. Luckily, they, in the anatomy lab, they all have gowns anyway. We added, face masks, and everybody has to wear goggles. And some students wear face shields. We have a couple instructors who are in a higher risk category because of age. And so they bought these, I always call them their astronaut suits, these suits where, they have an air bubble basically inside, and the filtered air thing, that comes through. They bought those on their own. So they wear those. So we all kind of adjusted. We have had, a couple incidences of students who didn't know they had COVID, who came down with COVID a couple days after the lab, and we were contact traced. And I answered all the questions of, how we're protecting ourselves. And they were like, you're doing everything that a hospital is doing. And so, we're fine. And nobody else, got it in any of these cases. So now we're back to teaching, like I said, in the lab, live, just spread out, and only half the number of students per section. So yeah, we're back, and so I'm much more, yay. I'm happy.
Imagine, yeah, that would feel good.
What would you say to students who are not as comfortable with introducing themselves to their professors? I know I was one of those students, and thankfully I've overcome that. But what would you say to someone who struggles with that, and what would be what's the benefit of doing that and getting to know your professors?
Yeah, that's a hard thing. I tend to be a little extroverted in that way, so I would talk to anybody. And I always found it funny when students, not, funny, but not funny, haha, but I always found it interesting when students would write me emails and say, I'm feeling uncomfortable, approaching you. And I'm like, what? I'm not approachable, So, but I totally get it. Take a friend, write an email, go to office hours and have somebody else there. read, something about them so you have a couple things, to talk about, if that makes you comfortable. Um, and I would say, if you just really aren't comfortable being in somebody's office, alone, try to meet them at the end of class, like try little things, like when I was teaching a large undergraduate class, at the end of class, there'd always be, 10 students around, right? Try being one of those students, but maybe don't ask a question, the first time, right? And so that you're, kind of in that bubble. And then, the next time, maybe add a question, to somebody else's, slowly, kind of work your way into having a conversation, and um, ask the professor, like something about themselves, their research, or a question that they can answer, so that you have a topic of conversation, right? That just figure out how you can be comfortable, talking to the professor, like what's going to help you, in this situation. But highly encourage, to figure out how you can get yourself, to do that. Um, in little chunks, right? Or try something, oh, that didn't work for me, and try it in a different approach. Maybe you're the first professor that you talk to, find the most approachable one, right? And start there, and then work your way to somebody who, maybe seems unapproachable, but actually isn't, right? And also maybe practice it in your daily life, like in the grocery store, right? It's easy to talk to somebody friendly behind you, but how about talking to somebody behind you in line who at first you look and you think, no, I don't want to talk to that person. Well, try, right? And talk about, like, hey, I usually don't buy this gum, but hey, I noticed that, Brad and Angelina, just, whatever, and just, get out of your comfort zone in a place that feels less threatening, than, than talking to a professor, and also understand that they're teaching because they like teaching, and they like interacting with students, and they want to talk to you. It's very rare when a professor doesn't really want to talk to you, and so just see if you can find something to talk to with about them.
That's so funny you mentioned the grocery store thing, because I'm always talking to strangers, like outside of school. Or I'm not in school anymore, but I would always do that. But it was always just in the classroom with some of the teachers who I thought were intimidating, or I felt a little, they were a little unapproachable. But I was always wrong about that, always. So, but the gum part that you said, like I do that all the time. Like I just say random things to strangers, and they end up laughing, and it's actually great. But it's yeah, but I agree. That was good practice, definitely good practice.
Yeah.
And there's no harm. Person from the grocery store isn't gonna care.
Some may, but who cares?
But you may never see them again.
Mhm, yeah. I think she froze. Are you froze? Yeah. Oh,
So the first day I just kind of passed her, and the second day I was like, hi, and she didn't look at me, and by like a week later she talked to me for so long that that I was just like, I gotta go, right?
Is this a student or a teacher? You froze a little at the beginning.
Oh yeah, sorry. I was telling a story about somebody that I saw, see when I walk my dogs, who at first seemed unapproachable, and every day I was like, hi, and eventually we started chatting, right? And so, it's that little, just that human connection. We all want to make human connections, and it's, and whatever you use to get that little human connection with somebody is, might be the way that you start to talk to them, and look on their wall, they got a picture of a dog or something, right? Or, hey, what kind of dog is that? Or, just find something that, you can make a connection with them. And that, I think, will make you feel more comfortable about, talking to them.
Yeah, definitely agree.
We're not scary.
You definitely are the ones to help out too. Because I know when I was going through family situations, that would be like the major push for me to talk to teachers to let them know what was going on, mainly when my grade would start to start to slip. That was a major push. But a lot of the teachers were they're regular people. They understand, and a lot of them were willing to help me out and make certain exceptions or accommodations to help me do that. I know not all teachers were that way, but a lot of them were. So there's great benefit in talking to professors.
Yep. I think that science is a wonderful field for anybody, but for women in general. I think when I kind of entered it, it was a little bit male dominated, but I think that these days there's just a lot of women in science, and find a woman in science that that can be your mentor, or that you just who you think, wow, I really appreciate their pathway or what they do, and I'm kind of interested in talking to them and ask them about their pathway. um, you know Most of us have a journey that we went on and choices that we made that have to do with our lives, um, or families. When I first had kids, right, I was the one that stayed home with the kids, because just for a little while, and then after a while I realized after 6 months that I needed to be back at work, and so I came back part-time. And sometimes with a partner you have to make these choices, like who's gonna, and these are all a part of the choices I think that women have to make, right, is that balance of family, and if you choose to have one, and what you need to feel like a whole person. You need to be with your girlfriends, or your friendship group. That's super important. You need to etch that into your time. And so I think that that's something that young women should hear. I think young women these days are a lot better at it than I was when I was young. um, and and I think that's just a wonderful thing. Like I watch my daughter, she's 20, and I watch her growing into the young woman that she is, and I'm so proud at some of the the things that she just does, right, that I would have been a little bit more shy about. And I think that's how you all have moved into the position that you are now in the world, right? Well, and I'm not even from the generation of like suffragette, like no vote, right? I'm not that old, right? But definitely, like I said, there weren't a lot of women in science, and you know we had to sometimes make family choices that maybe women don't make as much anymore, or so that those are some things that I would recommend, is just figuring out what's important to you, and figuring out how you can balance everything, and just going forth and being a strong woman, and not feeling like you have to overachieve, right, just so you can fit in, or make a mark, right? Just be the person that you are, right? I think those are some important things. And ask about ask other women about their lifestyle, and ask yourself, is that gonna work for me? Could I make that fit for me? What's important to me? um, those are some things to think about, but don't be too serious about it either. You can always try stuff, right? Like I tried being a stay-home mom, and after a few months I was like, I can't only do this, right? I know I can't only do this. So then I sat down with my husband, and I was like, we need to find a happy medium. And that was really hard for me, because you just the social norms of I should be with my kids. Why am I a mom and not wanting to be with my kids full time? Why do I need to work? Why? They're hard things to just not feel guilty about. I held a lot of guilt when I went back to work, and I went back part-time, and the whole time I was at work I was like, oh, I'm not a good mom. I'm being a terrible mom. And what my husband said to me one day was, you're a better mom when you go to work and get what you want for yourself, and you come home, and then you're a good mom, right? And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And you can insert whatever statement, it doesn't have to be about being a mom, right? that was just one place in my life where I was like, oh, you're right. I am much more calm at home and able to, do my other things in life when I get something that I need, right? Whether it's work or a run or, whatever. And, that comes back to, Lauren, I think what you were talking about, you just figuring out who you are and what you need, right? And then making it all fit. But sometimes you got to go to those places where you're like, all right, this is not working for me. What can I adjust so that I can find something that works for me? And working with the people around you to say, this is what I need. How can we achieve this? I think that's important.
Very much so.
Awesome. That summed everything up, I think, right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just try stuff.
Yeah.
You got nothing to lose. It's
yourself.
your life, right?
Right?
May as well
Nothing